have been in a relationship with my boyfriend, Daniel, for 5 months now, and every moment feels like a page out of a beautiful story. I can still recall the day we met so vividly, as though it happened just yesterday. It was during a church youth event where I was helping organize refreshments, busy arranging trays of sandwiches and pouring drinks, while Daniel was part of the logistics team, moving chairs and setting up the sound system. First, I barely noticed him amidst the flurry of activity, but there was something about his calm and kind presence that drew my attention. When he approached me, offering to help carry a heavy box of supplies, his smile was so warm and genuine that I couldn't help but smile back. It wasn't just politeness, it was the kind of sincerity that instantly made me feel at ease. That single gesture sparked a conversation between us, and before I knew it, we were engrossed in a discussion about everything: our shared love for music, the books that had shaped us, and the role our faith played in our lives. It was as though I had stumbled upon a kindred spirit, someone who understood me in ways I didn't know I needed to be understood. From that moment, things between us unfolded naturally. Our conversations were never awkward or forced. We would talk for hours about our dreams, the quirky things that made us laugh, and even the vulnerabilities we rarely shared with others. Daniel had a way of listening that made me feel truly heard, as though my words mattered deeply to him. His thoughtful nature shone through in small but meaningful ways, checking in to see how my day went, remembering the little things I mentioned in passing, and always making me feel valued. When he asked me to be his girlfriend a few weeks after we met, I felt a mix of excitement and hesitation. Relationships had always been something I took seriously, and I was cautious about rushing into anything. But when I looked into his kind, steady eyes, I realized he wasn't just anyone. He was someone who made me feel safe, someone whose presence felt like home. With a hopeful heart, I said yes, and from that moment, our connection only deepened. As our relationship grew, I decided it was time for Daniel to meet my family, a big step for me, considering how much my mother and sister mean to me. Their opinions carried immense weight, and I wanted them to see Daniel the way I did. I'll admit, I was nervous. What if they didn't like him? What if the dynamic felt awkward or forced? To my relief, Daniel won them over effortlessly. When I introduced him to my mother and sister one sunny Sunday afternoon, his respectful demeanor and genuine kindness immediately made an impression. My mother appreciated his polite and thoughtful nature, while my sister, ever the jokester, teased me endlessly about how I had finally found someone too good to be true. Their warm reception filled me with a sense of comfort and reassurance, making me believe even more in the strength of what Daniel and I shared. The days with Daniel felt like a beautiful rhythm, effortless yet profound. Whether it was a quiet walk in the park, a cozy afternoon at the local cafe, or marathon phone calls that lasted until the wee hours, our time together was always meaningful. Daniel had a gift for turning even the simplest moments into something special. On my worst days, his humor and positivity could lift me up, and his dreams for the future inspired me to dream bigger too. He often talked about his plans to start his own business one day, describing his vision with such passion that it was impossible not to be swept up in his enthusiasm. Hearing him speak about his goals made me admire him even more, not just for his ambition, but for the way he balanced dreaming big with taking tangible steps to make those dreams a reality. He wasn't just living for the present, he was building a foundation for the future, and I couldn't help but imagine myself as part of that future. For the first time in my life, I found myself thinking long-term, picturing what it might be like to build a life with someone. It was a new and exhilarating feeling, and it reassured me that what we had was more than just a fleeting romance. It was real, grounded in mutual respect, trust, and a shared vision for the future. Yet, life has a way of surprising us, even when everything seems perfect. One evening, as Daniel and I sat together in his cozy living room, enjoying the warmth of each other's company, I noticed a shift in his expression. The soft glow of the lamp illuminated his face, and while the atmosphere was serene, there was something on his mind. His usual playful smile was replaced by a contemplative look, and I could sense he was about to share something important. "There's something I've been thinking about," he began, his tone calm yet deliberate. My heart fluttered as I waited for him to continue, unsure of what he was about to say. "I think we should take our relationship to the next level," he said, his voice steady but tinged with vulnerability. I think we should be more intimate with each other. You know, share more moments together on a deeper level." His words caught me off guard. Though I understood his intentions, the suggestion stirred a mix of emotions within me: love, surprise, and a hint of unease. It was a conversation we hadn't broached before, and I paused to gather my thoughts, realizing this moment would test the trust and understanding we had built over the past months. As I looked into Daniel's eyes, searching for the right words to respond, I felt the weight of the decision before me. This was a turning point in our journey, a moment that would shape not only our relationship, but also how we navigated the challenges and joys that lay ahead. "Daniel," I began softly, my voice barely above a whisper, "I care about you deeply. I love the connection we've built, the way we understand each other, and how you make me feel like the best version of myself. But you know how important my beliefs are to me. I've always dreamed of saving that step until marriage. It's something I've held on to my entire life." He nodded, his expression calm, but I caught the faintest flicker of disappointment in his eyes. It was subtle, but it was there, lingering like a shadow. "I understand," he said after a moment, his tone measured yet earnest. "But for me, it's not just about the physical side. It's about being closer in every possible way, about connecting on levels we haven't explored yet." His words hung in the air, heavy and unyielding. I could feel the weight of his vulnerability, the trust he was placing in me by sharing his thoughts so openly. A part of me admired that honesty; it showed how much he cared. But another part of me felt conflicted, almost trapped. My values weren't just preferences, they were the foundation of who I was. And compromising them, even for someone as important to me as Daniel, felt like betraying myself. "I just need more time," I said finally, my voice steady but gentle, as though I was reassuring both of us. "It's not about how I feel about you. I care about you so much. But this is something I'm not ready for yet." He gave me a small, understanding smile and reached out for my hand. His touch was warm, his grip comforting, yet his eyes betrayed a mix of emotions, understanding tinged with frustration. "I respect that," he said softly, but I could hear the effort it took for him to say those words. That conversation lingered in my mind long after I left his house that evening. It marked the first time I felt the full weight of the complexities in our relationship. Love wasn't always straightforward. Sometimes it required difficult decisions that tested the strength of our bond. As much as I wanted us to grow closer, I knew deep down that I couldn't rush into something I wasn't ready for, not without losing a piece of myself in the process. But that wasn't the end of it. Over the next few weeks, his requests continued, sometimes subtly woven into quiet moments we shared and other times brought up more directly during serious conversations. Each time, I could see the tension in his eyes, the way his frustration built despite his attempts to remain patient. He couldn't seem to understand why I kept saying no, especially when he believed our love was strong enough to take this next step. Every time it came up, I was swept up in a tide of conflicting emotions. I wasn't angry at him. I loved him far too deeply for that, but I couldn't shake the confusion and hurt I felt. Why was it so hard for him to wait? Why did this one thing feel so pivotal to him? I knew he wasn't trying to pressure me out of malice. His feelings were genuine, and I could see that his intentions came from a place of love. And yet, every conversation left me feeling like we were standing on opposite sides of an invisible wall, one I wasn't ready or willing to break down. One evening, he took a different approach. We were sitting on the couch in his apartment, the lights dimmed to a soft glow, with a romantic melody playing in the background. He leaned closer, his hand brushing mine as he whispered words meant to charm and disarm me. His voice was low, gentle, filled with affection that was hard to resist. For a fleeting moment, I felt the pull, the temptation to let go of my resolve and give in to the depth of his love. But then, like a quiet whisper in the back of my mind, my inner voice reminded me of the promises I had made to myself, promises rooted in years of reflection, faith, and a commitment to my values. Those promises weren't just rules, they were symbols of the kind of life and love I wanted to build, one based on mutual respect and unwavering trust. I gently pushed him away, my voice firm but kind. "Daniel," I said, meeting his gaze directly, "I've told you before. I'm not ready for this, and I need you to respect that. It doesn't mean I love you any less. This is just something that's deeply important to me." He sighed, leaning back on the couch with a look that was equal parts disappointment and understanding. He didn't argue, though I could tell he wanted to. Instead, he simply nodded, giving me space to breathe. I wasn't angry at him. I understood how hard this must have been for him too. Love, I was learning, wasn't always effortless. Sometimes it was messy and complicated, requiring patience and compromise from both sides. Still, the tension lingered. One evening, Daniel opened up about his frustrations not just to me, but to my family. We were sitting together in the living room when he started speaking, his words slow and careful. He told my sister and mother how much he cared for me, but felt as though there was an emotional distance between us, a barrier he couldn't seem to overcome. He explained how he saw intimacy as a way of closing that gap, of expressing his love in its fullest form. I sat quietly, my heart pounding as I listened. I wasn't angry, just caught off guard. Daniel had always been someone who respected my boundaries, and hearing him speak so openly about his feelings left me feeling vulnerable in a way I hadn't expected. What surprised me even more was my family's response. My sister, ever the pragmatist, nodded thoughtfully. "Relationships are about balance and understanding," she said. "Sometimes, when you love someone, you have to meet them halfway." My mother, who had always been my staunchest supporter, added gently, "Love often requires sacrifices. It's not about abandoning your values, but about finding a way to show your partner how much they mean to you." Their words unsettled me. For so long, I had been certain of my stance, unwavering in my beliefs. But now, their perspectives planted a seed of doubt. Was I being too rigid? Was my refusal to compromise a sign of strength? Or was it a failure to truly trust the person I loved? "If you love him," my sister continued, her voice calm but firm, "maybe it's worth considering. Not because you're forced to, but because love sometimes means taking leaps of faith." That conversation left me torn. On one hand, I wanted to honor the values that had shaped me into the person I was. On the other, I couldn't ignore the reasoning behind their words. Could compromise be the key to deepening our connection, or would it mean losing a part of myself in the process? They weren't trying to change me, they were simply offering a perspective I hadn't yet considered. First, I didn't fully understand their words, but as the evening wore on, they lingered in my mind. I found myself turning them over in my head, examining them from all angles, letting them swirl with my own thoughts, feelings, and doubts. Was I being too rigid? Was I holding on to something, some idea, some belief simply because it was comfortable, even though it may no longer serve me? Could I adjust without losing the essence of who I was? The more I reflected, the more I realized that I didn't have all the answers, and that was okay. The only certainty I had was that I needed to make a decision that felt right, not just for Daniel, but for me as well. It wasn't just about his desires, his expectations, or his perspective. It was about aligning our future with my own heart. 2. For the first time in a while, I began to understand that growth doesn't mean abandoning who you are, but allowing yourself to evolve in a way that is both authentic and meaningful. After what felt like an eternity of internal struggle, I finally reached a conclusion. I had made my peace, and I was ready to take the next step. One quiet evening, as Daniel and I sat together in the warmth of his living room, our little sanctuary, I felt an overwhelming need to open up to him. The room felt intimate, the dim light casting soft shadows on the walls, and there was a sense of calm that made my words feel even more important. "I've been thinking a lot about us," I began, my voice softer than usual, "and I want to be honest with you about something that's been weighing on my heart." I paused, gathering the courage to speak the truth. "I want to take this step with you, not because I feel pressured, but because I trust you, and I believe in the future we can build together." His expression softened as he listened. His eyes filled with understanding and a deep affection that made my chest tighten with emotion. It was clear that he wasn't just hearing my words, but feeling the vulnerability behind them. He squeezed my hands gently, as if to ground both of us in the gravity of the moment. "Thank you for trusting me," he whispered, his voice full of sincerity. "I promise I'll never take that trust for granted." His words were simple, but they carried the weight of a lifetime of commitment. In that moment, something shifted between us. It wasn't just a matter of crossing a physical boundary or fulfilling a longing. It was a profound emotional experience. A moment of complete vulnerability where we could finally be seen in our truest forms. We weren't just two people coming together. We were two souls intertwining in the rawest, most authentic way. The room was quiet, save for the soft murmur of our conversation, but it felt like the entire world had fallen away. Every word we exchanged felt like a thread weaving us closer together, strengthening the bond between us in a way that words alone could never capture. We weren't just sharing a moment. We were creating a new layer to our relationship, one built on trust, understanding, and love. As we embraced this new chapter, I found myself letting go of the fears and doubts that had once held me back. This wasn't just about giving something to Daniel. It was about sharing a part of myself, a piece of my soul, and offering it to him with no reservations. The love and trust between us became the guiding force. And in that space, I felt safe enough to be truly vulnerable. Daniel's gentle reassurance, the way he prioritized my comfort and well-being, made me feel cherished. He never rushed me, never made me feel like my pace wasn't enough. In that moment, I realized that this wasn't just about him, it was about us, creating something beautiful together. The vulnerability wasn't a burden but a gift, one that we gave to each other freely. What stood out the most was the way he looked at me afterward. There was no arrogance, no sense of superiority, only pure affection and gratitude. His gaze held the kind of sincerity that spoke volumes. "Thank you for trusting me," he whispered once more, his voice thick with emotion. "I'll never forget this moment." And in his eyes, I saw the same gratitude reflected back at me. That night, I learned more about love than I ever thought possible. Love isn't just about grand gestures or the perfect words. It's about building trust, being vulnerable, and moving forward together. No matter how uncertain the future may seem, it's about having the courage to be open, to lay bare your soul and trust that the other person will honor it. As I lay beside him that night, I couldn't help but smile, knowing we had crossed this significant milestone together, one that would shape our relationship forever. Love, I realized, is about partnership. It's about walking through life hand in hand, lifting each other up, and sharing both the joys and challenges that come with it. I felt a deep sense of gratitude for what we had, and an even greater excitement for what the future held. What followed was a journey of self-discovery, one that taught me more about my own needs, boundaries, and my capacity to trust than I ever expected. Daniel, true to his word, showed me that a healthy relationship isn't built on pressure or coercion. It's founded on mutual respect, patience, and care. The months that followed were among the happiest of my life. Our bond only grew stronger as we navigated challenges, celebrated milestones, and embraced the highs and lows of life together. Daniel became more attentive, more thoughtful, always making sure I felt valued and loved. I, in turn, learned to open up more, to express my feelings freely, and to embrace compromise without sacrificing my own sense of self. Then, one sunny afternoon, as we walked through the park, a place where we had shared so many memories, Daniel surprised me. He stopped suddenly, his hand trembling slightly as he reached into his pocket. I could feel my heart race as he pulled out a small box, and I knew, in that moment, that everything had led to this. "I've been thinking about this for a long time," he said, his voice quivering with emotion. "You've shown me what love truly means, and I can't imagine my life without you. Will you marry me?" Tears filled my eyes as I looked at the man who had become my partner, my confidant, and the greatest source of happiness in my life. Without hesitation, I said yes. 8 months after we had taken our first steps toward deeper trust, We were engaged. Our journey hadn't been flawless, but it had been ours, and that made it beautiful. Every step, every challenge, and every breakthrough had shaped the bond we shared, making it even stronger than before. And as I looked into Daniel's eyes, I knew this was just the beginning of a lifetime of love, growth, and partnership. Thank you for taking the time to watch our videos. If you find the content useful and interesting, don't forget to like, share, and especially subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any new videos. Our channel will always update attractive, inspiring, and useful content for you. Click the bell icon to receive notifications as soon as there are new videos. Your support is the biggest motivation for us to continue to develop. Thank you and see you in the next videos.